Welcome back to the Fantasy Network, everyone. My name is, of course, Jimmy Nuts, and today we are so fortunate enough to be doing another Tad Williams book review, no spoiler thoughts and recommendations video, and I always refer to Tad Williams reviews simply as Tad Time.
Do we really need another Tad Williams review?
You know, Bobby B, without Tad Williams, George R. R. Martin would have never given birth to you, so maybe you should show just a little bit of respect.
You mean George is my mother?
Anyways, today we are talking about City of Golden Shadow, which is book one in the Otherland series, which comprises of 4 books, and they are all very big books, in fact, thousands and thousands of pages. So having finally finished this first book of Otherland, City of Golden Shadow, I wanted to talk about what it's about, what I liked about it, and who it might be for, and the struggles that some readers may have. This first book in Otherland in its totality is a science fiction story that does have dashes of fantasy, and I would say even a sprinkle of horror inside of it. This first book is really all about the main cast being introduced, but then being drawn into this mysterious virtual reality world that feels dystopian, also awe-inspiring, but also yet depressing at times. Very strange. If there's one word I could use to describe this book, it would be bewildering. The vast nature of this VR world is the biggest appeal, I would imagine, to most readers when entering Otherland as a series, especially this book one. And it serves as a vehicle for Tad Williams to do what he does best, and that is go to very weird and strange places. It is simply a surreal experience reading this book because at times I'm just like, what am I reading and who is this for? I had one person in my Discord describe this setting as not just VR and metaverse-like, dystopian, whatever, but also kind of like a Roblox universe. And that's not entirely wrong. But remember, this was written in the late 90s. So I think Tad might have had a bit of foresight here. It's not just surreal for its ideas, though. It's also just watching an author take this really weird concept and weird idea, and then writing this razor's edge of somehow balancing all of the strangeness while telling a cohesive, coherent story that I will say at times was starting to lean off the edge, but he brings it all back, and the threads that are laid down at the beginning of the book, they come together at the end. It's one of the most impressive feats of a book one I have seen, though it takes a while to get there. This may not be the best Tad Williams book that I have ever read, but it is the best showcase of Tad Williams as an author and showing off his talent, his range, and of course, his imagination. I don't think it's the worst place to start with Tad Williams, to be honest with you. I will note that this book is very methodical, and I think a lot of modern fantasy, sci-fi, sci-fantasy readers could consider this one a bit slow. But if you've been reading fantasy for an extended period of time, I don't think that might be much of a problem, knowing that it's methodical going into it. The leash that you will have to extend Tad Williams in this book is very long. You will have to be patient, and it will require a lot of trust and Tad Williams to take this book one of a massive 4-book series, and trust that he's going to pay it off in the end. Book one is a ton of setup and a ton of getting to know the cast, while really just dropping you into some of the most ridiculous situations in a VR world that you could imagine. It will require some trust on your end to know that this is book one in like a 4,000-page epic. I want to mention some of the characters that you'll be seeing in this book, and there is a vast cast of characters, but these are the ones that I consider to be the main cast of this story in Otherland, or City of Golden Shadow. And the first one is Paul Jonas, who is an infantryman in World War I. Yeah, World War I, but that's not where this book is set. This book is actually set in the future in the 21st century, but we do have POV all the way in the past. The other ones are in current day, and that should just give you the vibe of how just odd this book can be. I have to compliment Tad here just simply on the Paul Jonas POV, because he wrote some of the scenes in World War I and being in the trenches in this book, especially at the beginning in the prologue, that I thought were like just visceral and very human and like in your face. I kind of would like to see him write a book in that time frame, maybe a wartime book. I would read it. So just goes to show that range that I talked about with Tad Williams. We also have a virtual reality programming instructor named Rini. Her real name's Irene, but everyone calls her Rini, and she is in South Africa, and she is instructing another very important character named Zabu. There is another way of saying this. I'm not probably saying it right. It's !XABBU. I've heard that the exclamation point can be the sound. I don't know how to pronounce it, so I'm just going to call him Zabu. And I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. But Zabu is a part of the San people, or San people, also known as the Bushmen. So there's a really interesting forward from Tad Williams where he's talking about the representation of the Bushmen and also how he believes that culture is extremely important and one that we do not want to see wither away. And I actually really enjoyed the forward. It made me go and to do just a little bit more nonfiction reading on the internet about this culture and these people. And I do think that Tad Williams is doing a pretty good job here in the first book of representing that. However, I'm probably not the authority to say so. So take that with a grain of salt. And then we have Orlando Gardner, who has become the most amazing, legendary warrior in like a virtual reality MMO RPG that feels very real and provides some of, if not my favorite POVs actually in the book. And that VR MMORPG is of course called Middle Country, not Middle Earth, but Middle Country. And it has that fantasy sword and sorcery vibe, which is great. But the weird thing about Orlando is that he's actually a teenager with a terminal illness. And this is one of those things that Tad plays with to show that maybe the advancement of technology isn't all bad for everyone. I love this POV. And then on an army base down south in North Carolina, we have Christabel, who is taking care of a Mr. Sellers, who is a very, honestly, kind of creepy old guy that has her running errands and breaking her parents' rules. And there's a lot of mystery on that, so I'll leave it at that. But she is featured in this book, though way less than the other POVs for the most part. Because this book is so methodical, you are going to get to know the cast of characters that I just told you. You're going to get to know their family members, why they are, where they would like to go, and the things that are driving them to their next goal or motivation or into the VR world. You're also going to see a lot of development around the relationships between these characters of the ones who actually end up coming together. So whenever you have a methodical book that is a slower pace, I do think you get a little bit more intimate knowledge of the characters. And that's what I liked about this book. I think that's what carries this book, along with obviously the absurd settings that we get from ancient Egypt to some futuristic stuff to like odd rituals that are performing with like blood sacrifices and stuff. I mean, this is like a sci fantasy book on an acid trip, really giving like a China Mieville a run for his money here. And now that I mention it, I did say this to someone, I almost feel like this is Tad Williams throwing his hat into the weird fiction genre, but maybe I'm off. I love in this book how Tad Williams makes the VR society of which people live in to feel like a big thing and still have it feel like it's commonplace. People don't seem like they're that freaked out about it. Even Zabu, who's learning about it, which is, of course, the lens which we get to learn from it, which is a bit cliche, expositioning from someone teaching someone else. But nonetheless, while it is very convenient, I think he does it very well, and I was interested in it the entire time. Also, the African setting and things that are going on in that society, and there's a lot of dynamics there that I found to be very interesting as well. It really does make me think of, Zuckerberg's metaverse, but like not lame. Tad envisions where this alternate society where like fashion doesn't end at just like holographic clothes and like, just avatars, which we see in the metaverse, which just seems so very lame. But there's like a whole sense of different fashion in this net. And it just makes me think that maybe the metaverse is like the worst version of what we could have got with like a virtual reality society. And one very accurate prediction that Tad included in his virtual reality world is that there's already classism and aggressive zoning laws, and where you can go depends on who you are and who you know and what factions you're a part of. Aggressive rules and regulations. And this will without a doubt be a thing as we transition into some form of existing online in a more virtual reality basis. And while the virtual reality is the main setting and where all the cool stuff really happens, Tad Williams still takes care to show off this South African setting very, very well, which I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, but it's also just showing subtle differences between cultures and things that we take for granted. And these are the things that make it feel like it's not just thrown into the pot just to say, hey, look, I did this. But, taking time to think about very small things. And one very simple example of this is someone saying, oh man, we were this close, and making this little finger gesture with a common phrase that we talk about in our culture. And Zabu is like, what does that mean? what does this mean? I don't understand what you mean by that. And it's like, oh yeah, you would never know that if you didn't live here and do it every day and see people do it the entire time you're growing up. So it's like those little cultural differences that Tad takes time to do that I actually appreciate a lot as a reader. Tad Williams takes time to show what this kind of technological advancement would mean for us as a people, as human beings even. Certainly there are issues that are plaguing our society now and have been plaguing our society for a very long time, and those things will probably spill into whatever new landscape we have, whether it's virtual reality or some other simulation or whatever it might be in a secondary world. But Tad Williams also takes the time, and this is something that I don't think a ton of other books that have done this type of thing that I have read, at least. I'm not saying that as a blanket statement, but the books that I have read, the remarkable thing about Tad Williams' take on this is that he also shows how powerful an alternative world or secondary world, virtual reality world can be for other people, and how it can be a strength for those who are weak or sick or somehow unable to do things that they used to be able to in everyday life. And I think that that's a pretty powerful statement. It shows that there's a lot of nuance to something like this technology, and it can be for good, and it can also be for bad. It can be a new avenue to live a totally different life. It's a very complex topic that I'm not exactly smart enough to talk about, but it's certainly one that is creatively explored in Otherland in book 1 here, City of Golden Shadow. And I am very excited to see what Tad does with that in the future books as well. So simply put, I actually think this is an awesome book 1. I had a couple people reading this along with me, and not surprisingly, quite a few dropped out because it is long. It is slow. But I think it's worth it for me personally. So if you're a Tad Williams fan, I think you kind of know what to expect because he's always been somewhat of a methodical writer. This is one that's not going to just burn through the pages. I think it's one that you sit in for a while, and one that you can get very immersed in if you're not too concerned with having a grasp on everything that's going on at all times. This was written in 1998, but it feels very relevant today still, even with all the technological advancements since this book. And some of it really hasn't aged all that poorly, to be honest with you. And I'm just once again impressed by Tad Williams' creativity and his range. Yes, this book is slow, and things are not always clear how they will come together. But Tad Williams, I think, has earned a trust of many, 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 probably millions of readers at this point, that he will bring it all together. I want to thank you so much for listening to my thoughts and semi-review of this book, City of Golden Shadow and Otherland. If you've tried it out before, let me know down in the comments below if you're going to try it out. If it didn't work for you, let me know down in the comments, respectfully, of course, why you didn't love it, or if there's other Tad Williams books that you do love. I love War of the Flowers, Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn, Brothers in the Wind, Shadow March. I read book 1 of that and also loved it. So Tad Williams is, I mean, at this point, he has to be one of my favorite fantasy authors of all time, even when he's writing some science fiction. But again, thank you so much for checking out this video. If you like it, you can hit like. If you dislike it, you can hit dislike. And if you love it, think about subscribing. I do all kind of bookish content here on the channel. Not all just fantasy and sci-fi either. And I have a lot of long form content as well called Chatting with Nuts. I'd love for you to check that out as well. There is a Patreon in the description. It's optional, but always appreciated. And until I see you next time, be good, be safe, and remember to always keep turning the page. I want to give a big shout out to all my patrons, especially my Kingsguard, which include Bridger, Zan, Adam K, Amel, Curtis L, Jonathan J, Prithvi, Eric B, Chadia, Steve Talks Books, Taylor D, Matthias D, Carlos, Yolanda, Amanda L, John C, John, Garrick, Evie, Henrik, Benjamin C, Sebastian M, Frank C, C. Scott, Jacob Wade, Darren, Jobot, Terrence F, Michael B, Lauren M, Nicholas E, Kai C, Kev, Ryan, J, Jennifer M, Shad, Amanda V, Ikaika, RJ, Pat S, Stuart C, Oscar A, Derry, and Tanner. Thank you all so much. You're the best.